Welcome everybody to the Kubernetes SIG Testing bi-weekly meeting. I'm your host, Aaron Krickenberger. Today is May 5th, 2020. This meeting is being publicly recorded and will be posted to YouTube later as we all adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct by looking at an adorable puppy. Sorry, I mean by being our very best selves. Ben's new puppy is distracting me. Today on the agenda, we have Harshal, who wants to talk about introducing Fedora-based images for node testing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the work I've done to start migrating Prow or Prow build clusters over to K-Infra, the CNCF owned infrastructure for Kubernetes. I did not have any time to scrape through and find any interesting test info PRs, but if anybody has anything they want to shout out, we can do so. And Hippy wants to talk about deploying prow.cncf.io. And then this week is the magical week where SIG testing has been selected to give an update to the Kubernetes community on Thursday. So I would love any input anybody has on what to do so, or on what to say. So with that, Harshal, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, thanks. Let me just pull the agenda. Yeah, so so there's a background to it is recently C Group V2 support was added in Kubelet, and now the runtimes, right, like Creo or Containerd, they are getting ready to add test cases that that will test C Group V2 functionality. Even the runtime, the run C patches were merged in, and there's another runtime which supports out of the box CRun. It's called CRun, the functionality of C Group V2. So looking at that, I will be working with, so I predominantly work for Creo, but I'll be working with a maintainer of Containerd. His name is Mike Brown, to essentially make sure that Kubelet also, or Kubelet node tests also test C Group V2 support. So out of the box, if we have to choose an operating system for our tests, it's Fedora 31 and above. Because it comes with C Group V2 functionality enabled by default. Nevertheless, it's one of the most popular distros anyway. So I submitted a PR, or it's a work in progress PR. I have given the link for it in this doc, agenda doc. If you go to that link, you will see in a typical node test way, I have a file called image-config.yaml, second last from the bottom. The reason I came to this meeting is I want to know which Google project these images should be should be posted to. Right now, for this work in progress PR, I just using a development account that I have access to, but that's the image is right now private. But the parameter image and project, right? Traditionally, all the node images run COS or Ubuntu images as an operating system underneath. But looking at the C Group V2 functionality, I think having Fedora will also be very useful. So anyone has an idea which project where we can have this image? I know how to make this image. If that's a concern, I can create the image, but if I have access to the project, I would like to push it there so that we can start having slowly C Group V2 testing going on.
Anybody have any feedback? I have two thoughts off the top of, or two questions off the top of my head / thoughts. So I see today there's already a Cryo E2E Fedora job in test grid. I don't actually know what YAML that links to, but how is what you are proposing different than the existing job today?
So we want to add from the SIG node pre-submit jobs, both for Creo and Containerd. which will be, so right now the sample or the work in progress PR that I added is just for, but it just copies the non-conformance test that are already run with containerd. But that's just the beginning, because I want to run these existing test cases on Fedora first, and then we will add more test cases going forward. But the biggest problem right now we have is right now how to get a node tests going on a Fedora based image. This particular test case, I need to look into it, whether I doubt whether it uses Fedora at all. Or if, sorry, it says Fedora, whether it uses C group v2 or not, but it's still not the pre-submit test case.
Okay, so this is about making it a pre-submit, kind of the way that containerd job is an optional pre-submit today.
Yes, yes.
Um,
But
okay.
the problem I'm having is going to be faced by containerd too, because they will also have to have a host that is C group v2 enabled, unless they choose to not use Fedora and use other OS and enable C group v2. But Fedora comes by default C group v2 enabled.
So as far as like which project, my answer is kind of like all of them. I think it became pretty clear a week or two ago that the current SIG node tests being pinned to a single project doesn't seem to be really scalable. If one of them ends up blowing up, causes the project to run out of resources or causes the project to have its network access revoked, then every single other node test that uses that project blows up as well. So what we prefer to do for end-to-end tests is to have a pool of GCP projects that can be used to, provision resources like VMs running Fedora or COS or Ubuntu for Node E2E tests. And ideally, as little customization to those projects as possible. So is there any reason you couldn't just make the image publicly available?
The one I'm using is a development project that is not really used for production setup. So that was going to be my next question. Like, when you say all of them, which projects do you say I should use? And I need to have somebody either create that Fedora image for me, or I can create it from like myself if I have the required access.
I'm unfortunately slightly less familiar with what's involved in pushing out an image intended for a GCE VM as opposed to a container image. So I feel like I would ask somebody from SIGNode for that. I see Ben unmuting though.
Is there not just like a Fedora image that's official? Like with Ubuntu, I don't think we're hosting our own. I'm pretty sure we're just using, like, same with COS, like we're just using the official images.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So with Ubuntu, you're using the official images. Unfortunately, there are no official images for Fedora on GCP.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't know offhand what the process is involved for putting an image into GCP and then making it accessible to multiple other projects, but that's what I'm asking for. I'm trying to find a link to the file that would show you like the list of projects that we currently have in the pool. But the reason I'm saying all of them is because I'm also in the midst of creating a bunch of GCP projects over here, and I will be creating more. I will need to grow them. So the answer I give you today is going to continuously change over time as we migrate things around and as we grow the pool. So however you do it, doing it in a way that it could be publicly consumable or accessible would probably be uh, the best way of doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of makes sense. I just don't know whether I have access to any stable project that I can use. I don't want to end up making something public from a development project, which ends up resetting something, which ends up breaking the test cases tomorrow. So I would rather go with the project that are dedicated for the SIG testing or testing in general, and then have the image hosted there. So my question would be, how do we, whom should I contact so that they can push the image on behalf of me? I don't want access. I can give them a image star file and they can just upload it for us. So that also works fine for me. But I need to know the contact whom to approach for those things, the project names and people to contact.
Right. Well, as it stands, I don't think we do anything like that currently because we do just like use officially hosted images so that we're not maintaining that and that they're kept up to date and whatnot.
Okay, so I'll have to go back with this info, but let's say if I manage to convince someone to give me stable enough project, GCP project, will that be okay with this PR, like SIG testing point of view, or from the PR's approval point of view? Uh, do you see any concerns there?
I don't
I don't think so.
I don't think I have any major concerns.
But I see you just posted a link for all the projects that you are listed there. Is there
Right.
someone I can talk to there who might have the access to this project and I can hand over the Fedora
I,
image that I have?
I would start by approaching the chairs in SIG node and seeing where that goes.
Okay, okay.
Um, I I feel like what I would prefer to have happen in the long term is to maybe create a project for this over in WG Kate's infra, but I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. So I kind of want SIGNode to own this as a SIG versus just you doing it as a person, if that makes any sense. Because I'd like to make sure SIGNode is on board with supporting this. And they're currently going through and auditing like all of their Node E2E jobs, and also potentially want the ability to test other operating systems or other images. So I would like to see sort of a pattern developed, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. In fact, I'm coming here after attending the Signode meeting last week, where they were okay. Signode chair Donna Chen, right? She was okay with the Creo and both. In fact, she's the one who suggested
Right,
Containerd should also have these test cases. So
right,
so I wrote something quickly up, then realized that my project the image is not available on GCP. That time I didn't know that the Fedora image is not available. So I think what I'll do is, you have given me the list of projects. I can go back to Signode and ask them which one of these they own or have access to, and whether we can host our Fedora image there.
right. But the
Does
point I'm
that make
trying to
sense?
yes, it does. The point I'm trying to make by giving you that list of projects is that, like, for example, any, not quite, but like any one of the projects listed in in the GCE project pool, for example, could be used by an end-to-end test. So you need to find some way for your image to be accessible by all the projects listed in that file, not just picking one. But
Yeah.
yeah, like, so because it could be you want to like create a GCP project just to host the image as an artifact, independent of it being used as a place to create test resources and stuff.
Is that what you're suggesting, that we should create an independent project just to host images?
I honestly don't know what a good practice is for this because I have no experience managing images for GCE VMs.
Okay,
So
fine. That sounds fair. Yeah, I think I got what I wanted. I think I'll go back to Signode and asking them what buckets they own and whether we can host image there or not. That
okay,
makes sense more. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
yeah, I appreciate your time, Marshall. Um, Okay. And thank you very much, Daniel Roth, for taking notes. You are amazing. So the next thing I wanted to discuss briefly was work I have been doing as part of the Kate's Infra working group. Oh, it's been Hippy. Okay, I thought I saw you take some notes as well. So I presented a plan to Kate's Infra, which I will find the link for as I'm talking, I guess. I'm gonna share my screen. So this is a PR that I made to describe how to stand up build clusters over in Kate's Infra's CNCF stuff. Or sorry, in Kate's Infra's CNCF owned GCP organization. What this does is it uses, this is probably too small. Let me blow this up. It uses Terraform to provision the actual build cluster. And then I kind of have to do some manual stuff to manage the Kubernetes YAML resources. But the idea is via Terraform, let me find a README. There we go. I stood up two clusters. One was a trusted cluster intended to run jobs that need access to sensitive secrets or the ability to push to sensitive places. So for example, the trusted cluster would be used to run jobs that can push, it can run GCB, Google Cloud Build things to build images and push them to staging buckets. Or you can see this being used to run Parabolus or something that requires a GitHub OAuth token that is capable of doing things to the Kubernetes GitHub organization, stuff like that. So this describes how I had to run Terraform apply to create the cluster, create the necessary secrets, hand off the appropriate credentials to the existing prow on call, and make sure that this build cluster's service account is able to write to the appropriate GCS buckets. So all the logs still end up in this wonderful GCS bucket called Kubernetes Jenkins. Jenkins will apparently live with us for quite some more time. But then it's consumed by the rest of our test infrastructure. And so I did something similar for an untrusted build cluster where I added an instance of Boscos over there, and I provisioned 20 GCP projects for it to manage. And then I migrated over the following release blocking jobs and the following release informing jobs. And I'll do this live, so I taunt the demo gods. At least as far as I checked, the release blocking jobs did not turn into a sea of red. So I think the build cluster is more or less, the new build cluster is more or less working. Which is awesome. This means that the CNCF is paying to run some of these jobs, and they're in a place that could conceivably be accessed or managed by non-google.com accounts or people. I had some open questions for the group. So one of them has to do with some of the amazing dashboards that are available at monitoring.prow.kates.io, which are going to take some time to load. So the Boscos resource usage dashboard I find particularly useful since we were just talking about E2E projects for Node to provision, right? Like there are pools of projects here. Green is good, it means the project is free. Red is bad. It means it's, well, not bad, but red means that project has been leased out or taken by an end-to-end job for it to go stand up resources and stuff. Blue means Boscos' janitor is in the midst of cleaning that project up before putting it back into the pool for lease, so on and so forth. So this just gives me a quick glimpse into, we have plenty of headroom and capacity to throw more end-to-end jobs and use more clusters. That's awesome. What I want is a graph that shows me the same thing, but for this other Boscos instance in this other build cluster over in CNCF land. And I think I can do that. I named the pool something unique so it wouldn't clash with any of the pool names here. What I'm more concerned about is whether adding a new Boscos instance will throw off the metrics in this dashboard. This is the Boscos server dashboard, which shows just general HTTP, latency and response codes for different calls to the Boscos API, which has been helpful in troubleshooting like some resource contention and lock issues within Boscos over the past couple of months. There have been a number of PRs which have greatly improved its performance. But you'll notice this dashboard currently doesn't differentiate between like which Boscos instance all these metrics are coming from. So as far as I can tell, this dashboard is generated by, I will find it for you. Most of the resource files for that dashboard and the Grafana and Prometheus and whatever things that drive it live inside of the monitoring directory, inside of the Prow directory. And I believe, is it this? No. Is anybody familiar enough with this to tell me what file I should be looking for? I can't remember. Oh, here, I think it's additional scrape configs. So there's this thing here which allows this dashboard to scrape from the google.com hosted build cluster and Boscos instance. And if I were to just add an entry for another Boscos instance, it's not clear to me that Prometheus automatically tags the metrics with the host that it's scraping these things from. Does anybody have any insight or suggestions on what to do here?
I think Steve was running this magic before. He might be the best to contact.
Okay. So that's one thing. Let's see here. I think the only other thing I wanted to just mention for the group is part of the point, and I'll stop my share here. Part of the point of running this infrastructure is to be able to allow community members to support it and access it. And the permission structure that I have more or less copy pasted is probably not quite set up for that. So if anybody is interested in helping me or the fine folks over in the Kate's Infra working group come up with a more appropriate permission structure and a way of managing it, I would super appreciate the help. The way we had things set up for, we have another cluster that runs a lot of like production-y services like perf-.kates.io or gcsweb.kates.io, things like that. And we use something where membership in a Google group is then used for RBAC to say which namespace you have access to in that cluster, which is super cool. But I feel like I'm gonna want to give people the ability to, maybe like SSH into VMs inside of one of those end-to-end projects to be able to monkey with it or to be able to manage it temporarily, and then eventually like revert that back to whatever the known standard thing is. Or like, I probably want to give members of the community who are willing to step up and help support this infrastructure, the ability to view or create monitoring and logging driven dashboards that are helpful to gain insight on what's happening. So if anybody feels like helping out over there, I would super welcome it. Any questions on that? Okay. Like I said before, I did not have any time to go through and find any amazing test infra PRs. Does anybody have anything they want to brag about? Okay.
I was going to say something I'm pretty happy with where we wound up with the kind 0.8 release this past week. But I think that's going to have to be it because the little one is getting a timeout.
Okay.
Very excited.
Puppy is excited about kind. Sorry, what was that, Rob?
I'm just saying that. What's your little one's name again, Ben?
Bobby
Yeah,
Tail.
you heard me there. Yeah. Obviously, the puppy's very excited about kind as well.
Okay. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Hippy, who's interested in deploying a Prow instance for CNCF and had some questions for the group.
That I am. Thanks, Aaron. Part of the, as we hand stuff off to a larger community outside of Google for managing the Kubernetes infrastructure, I see that as a neat opportunity to help replicate the way that our community functions so well with community managed infrastructure. And a good place for that is within the CNCF, because they have a multitude of other projects that could also benefit greatly from having interactions from Prow and all the ecosystem that Test Infra provides. I've created a CNCF infra org, and I don't think there's anything in there yet. But the idea is to help support initially the CNCF conformance program, and specifically the CNCF/K8s-conformance repo, so that our automation for vendors wanting to submit their test results and ensure that their clouds can run all of the conformance tests in a way that's verifiable. We've had some time slip through the cracks where we were basing it on the count of tests and not verifying. So rather than having it be a human automating or a human going through and saying this looks okay, starting to add some bot stuff there. We have Google, who's graciously donated quite a bit of bits of infrastructure for the CNCF, but it's specifically for the Kubernetes community. We have other cloud, other supporters as well, that I thought it might be interesting if we could look at creating infrastructure that was supportable by. My great goal would be that it's all self-hosting on Kubernetes, but for now, let's do the small pieces that we can. So we're modeling similarly off of what Aaron's working on and what the initial work we did with the K8s Infra working group on the Terraform approach. So I'm looking to create the permissions model and the creation of the node pools and the creation of, well, in this case, we're probably going to use some Amazon resources. So their versions of these things to the point of bringing up a Prow instance for CNCF.io. I know that in this process we'll hit a lot of Googleification. And so what I'm kind of looking for is some direction on where those gotchas will come. And also anybody that's interested in seeing and I really feel that Test Infra and the tooling that we have put together that supports the Kubernetes community and the way that that works is something that can have a great impact on how many organizations work in the world, particularly if we can find a way where it's easy to configure and spin up in a modular way. So that's the call. It's let's take the tooling that we've so wonderfully created for the Kubernetes community. As an initial trial, let's get it up and running for the CNCF. For example, allowing people to sponsor a particular project and then having all of the, is it Boscos? Or to spin up clusters there and then being able to assign prow jobs to those clusters. That would be one of the initial things, but you know, I don't have much of an agenda other than just trying to get the conversation started and know that we're spending a good amount of time on this for the Kubernetes conformance, the KATES conformance working group effort.
I just posted in the Slack chat, and not in the Slack chat, in the Zoom chat, a link to our repository where we host our PRAO stuff in the Kima project. We have been doing some work on a PRAO installer. It's not really documented right now, but it helps us set up PRAO instances fairly easy on new GCP projects, for example. It takes care of creating buckets, service accounts, and everything. So that might be something that you might want to look at when you are looking at Google specific things, because that's all in there in Go code, basically. That might be easy if you're looking to abstract this to Amazon things.
This is super
Excellent.
cool.
Thank you.
I had no idea this existed.
Yeah, just for the just for the Google specific connection. So right now, PRAO is sort of tightly coupled to GCP, mostly due to the fact that it only supports GCS as object storage for test results and pretty much anything else. But there's right now someone working on adding S3 support all the way through, but it's not done yet. Just as a comment regarding GCP coupling.
I've added that in our notes here. That's excellent.
Yeah, there's that, and I think we also we take advantage of the ability to bind a given pod to a given service account when it comes to allowing PRAO to talk to privileged services. I don't know if there's an equivalent sort of thing for other cluster deployments, but we are trying where possible to get out of the business of storing secrets inside of a cluster lest they get leaked. This seems like, I don't know, I'm just glancing at it. This seems like a way more fully featured version of Tackle. I am curious what motivated you, or if you have any interest in upstreaming this.
We can do that. It was mostly motivated by not wanting to use Bazel, and also of, I mean, the documentation itself. Like we had an own install PRAO for your own workload cluster or something documentation where, oh, add these 5 service accounts, and then in the end the installer failed because it needed one more, and we tried to automate this, and also putting that into Go code, we felt like we can test it easier. So hopefully that helps, and if we can talk about upstreaming that as well. We didn't know it was useful for other people.
You'll probably have to use Bazel if you upstream it.
I don't want to, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Okay, yeah, this is neat. Alvaro, I think you also run a Prowl instance, right? Do you have any suggestions for Hippy or thought or how you run Prowl?
No specific suggestion. So right now I'm working for Red Hat, so I'm working on the OpenShift instance, but I worked for another company for which I set up a Pro instance before. And that was basically, there's a starter.yaml file and a doc. And I followed that and read quite a bit of code at the time. The getting started part takes time because docs are not up to date and no one is really maintaining that. But once you get to the point where the Pro instance is up and running, it's not so much maintenance. You need to have some job that bumps it somewhat regularly, but that's mostly it.
That's one issue that we ran into, that you will soon find that Prow doesn't have any releases and you're living off Docker containers that are commit hashes, basically per day, maybe multiple. So there is somewhere in the Prow repository, there's an announcement.md file where basically all the changes for Prow are maintained. And that's our file, at least, where we say, hey, we want to have the change from March 25th. That's our new Prow node. And we check then deployments on the upstream Prow, if it got reverted at one point, or if we have to get maybe the March 26th version because of some fixes that were done during the day that didn't work on the 25th. But usually you can handle around this announcement MD as well.
Yeah, I can add to that I can tell you that the vast majority of Pro changes are not in this file. It's a bit of a problem because the people that actually work on the code are mostly solving their own problems. And there is in no way any kind of product management around Pro. So people more or less solve the immediate problems they have in a way that's good enough for them and in a way that someone else finds the code change approvable. And that's about it. So that's, yeah, why it's, among other things, not having any kind of proper release management.
Those things are not ideal. I would agree. I feel as though even those of us at Google who have to manage multiple Prow deployments and or multiple Prow build clusters, as Ben is suggesting in chat, have found that it is a little difficult at times. There is one proposal that's been posted to the SIG testing mailing list for what it's worth to have this concept of a staging Prow instance to which changes are deployed automatically and then some end-to-end tests could be run against it. And then if those end-to-end tests pass, then opening up a PR to bump the actual production Prow deployment. If you can call how we treat it production. So that's one thought. Another proposal, which is, I think, being drafted, I'm not sure where it is the idea of having a staging repo and a production repo. So instead of you having to like scrape an image tag out of manifests inside of the test info repo, you could just get like the latest tag inside of the production images repo, so that all of the like development builds, the multiple image tags a day get pushed to the staging repo, but the image tag that's actually happy and deployed gets pushed over to the final repo. So those things could help alleviate some of that. I would agree with Alvaro that sometimes the set of changes that fold into a given Prow instance don't necessarily land in announcements.md. so people try to put breaking changes in there when possible. I feel like the overall velocity of code changes to Prow has kind of slowed down quite a bit lately as well, which makes it maybe less of a bumpy ride. Maybe Ben disagrees with me.
Aaron, there's a proposal. Is there a proposal to extract Boscos out of test infra?
Sorry, I didn't understand the word.
I seem to remember that in a couple of meetings back that somebody was talking about productizing Boscos. Is that still underway?
Yeah, I think we're kind of trending now into meeting topics I wanted to talk about to the community. So the staging Prow proposal was one. Whatever happens with Boscos would be another. I think that was a proposal and document that was brought up a couple meetings ago and then also sent out to the SIG testing mailing list, which describes the intent. I'm not necessarily sure that timeline has really been nailed down for that, but as a member of the GitHub admin team, I did at least help create a Boscos repo over in the Kubernetes SIG org to allow us to start that migration. But it's unclear to me what the specific next steps are and when they will happen. And also just to kind of plus one what Alvaro was saying, the way that I don't necessarily manage super well an ongoing like Prow instance, but I do have a personal Prow instance, and I followed the getting started guide it's documented in the test info repo, and there were some like manual bumps along the way, but it mostly just worked, and it's since been improved since I last went through it. I think it even describes how to like set up that auto bump job and stuff like that. The particular challenges or hurdles that I had to jump through was that I wanted to create kind of like the Kima project has done here. I wanted to create a repo that was kind of like just the config for a Prow deployment and not so much any of the test infra code. Like I didn't want to fork the test infra repo. Okay, with the remaining 10 minutes, unless there are any other comments, I'd like to move on to community update stuff. All right, share my screen again. I literally just did these slides like 20 minutes before this meeting, so there's not much on them. The standard format for updating to the community is talking about stuff we did. If anybody has any suggestions, toss them in the SIG testing Slack, or you are able to comment on these slides as well. They're linked in the agenda, and I'll send out a link to the SIG testing mailing list and post it in Slack. So some stuff off the top of my head I know we did since our last update in October 2019 was we stopped retrying flakes in end-to-end tests, which was really painful for a little while, but allowed us to find things like a race condition upstream in run C. We updated Go triage. I love this thing. To be able to, you used to be able to just like include, like restrict down to like what jobs do I want to see the results for. So like here I'm seeing there's a cluster of failures that have happened pretty recently in like the last day or so that all seem to do with this job here. So like if I was curious if this happens to be failing anywhere else, I could take this and say I want to exclude this job from the test results, and that shows me what the failures are without that job. So I could sort of see like maybe what the next most critical thing is. And you can do the same thing with the failure text in here, so on and so forth. And then we removed about 160 tests, which have been continuously failing for quite some time because they were using an internal GKE environment that has been broken and isn't intended for external use. I don't know what our plans for 2020 are. I could use some help there. Don't know how they're going to affect other people in the community. I do want people to kind of revisit the job. I think I'm gonna ask SIGs to revisit the jobs that they own. Like I said, SIG Node recently discovered they were kind of unable to effectively troubleshoot or debug the end-to-end tests that they own. Let's see if their dashboard looks any better if I can find the word node. We had an incident where like the release blocking tests for Node were like continuously failing, and all patch releases were kind of blocked on solving this. So I helped them sort of unblock the specific release branch tests, but you can see they have like all these other jobs that are continuously failing, and they're taking sort of an assessment and figuring out like, okay, these tests in this job are continuously failing. Do we know why they're failing? Do we care enough to support this? Yada, yada, yada. I'm supposed to give updates on each sub-project that falls under SIG testing. So I was going to talk about the making Boscos as a product thing. I was going to talk about the fact that Kind released version 0.8 recently, and it supports restarting Kind clusters after a reboot, which has been a very much asked for feature. And I'm sure Ben can fill me in on many other things. For Prow, I talked about the Prow staging instance thing. I know we have definitely leaned into using workload identity to try to improve our security posture. And there was another proposal sent out to the mailing list about having like one Prow instance potentially serve many different projects or repos or whatever, but then have different DEC instances. So that if like right now, not that I want this to be the state of prow.k8s.io, but right now prow.k8s.io kind of runs builds for projects unrelated to Kubernetes, like Bazel and Istio and things like that. And it would be cool if I was an Istio developer and I logged in and I saw only the Istio jobs on my UI. The Testing Commons sub-project has been pushing a proposal in the past couple of weeks about refactoring the E2E framework package inside of the Kubernetes repo. And breaking enough dependencies so that it could be moved to the staging repo so that it could be consumed as an artifact without having to import or vendor in the Kubernetes repo, which is a bad idea and you should feel bad for doing it, but some people have had to do it in the name of expediency. To help support that, the import boss job. So import boss is a tool that enforces that this package is only allowed to import these other packages, or it's not allowed to import these other packages. It supports YAML as a format. It used to only support JSON, so we had no idea why rules were being added where. So you can see now that we can like comment why these rules are here. Oops, sorry. Like the packages in the package directory shouldn't import things from commands and vice versa, or whatever. So because we can comment why these dependencies and these rules are here, that should help us untangle and break apart the E2E frameworks things. And it now also applies to all test files, not just regular Go packages. I don't know if there are any related KEPs that we should care about. I'm open to feedback there. And then I need to give updates on any related working groups. K8s Infra is the only one I know of. Today, K8s Infra runs all these fine services: self-service DNS, self-service Google Group Reconciliate, Google Group Management, the go.k8s.io redirector, perf-.k8s.io was moved over recently. GCS Web, the thing that lets you view artifacts in GCS like a plain old website, that runs over there now. I think all the Slack infra stuff now runs over there. So the thing that lets you like right click on a message and report it to a moderator, stuff like that, I think that's runs on community infrastructure. And then the ability to push to your own GCR repo and have that promoted to production is coming very soon. And then I went over the Prow build cluster stuff. I don't know exactly how to tell people to contribute, although I did call out that issue on permission stuff, and I will try pruning help wanted issues. And there's that. So that was me just dry running, trying to stay under 10 minutes. Does anybody have anything they think is missing from that update or would like to see added from that update or whatever? Okay, I'm gonna go tell the community that's what we're working on, and I appreciate your input and support. That gives us 4 minutes back. Does anybody have anything else they would like to discuss?
Thanks for preparing and representing us at the community meeting and for all your work.
Okay, cool. Thank you all for your time. It was great to see you all. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. Happy Tuesday.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.